While Hillary Clinton continues to play the blame game over her loss last year, some of her newest excuses, well, Brexit and a guy by the name of Nigel Farage.
The amount of fabricated false information that your voters were given by the Leave campaign. Yeah. Well, I'm not as familiar with, but I'm very familiar with what the Leave side said, because they transported a lot of that on behalf of Trump. You had, Farage campaigning for Trump and the like. You know, the big lie is a very potent tool.
Here to react, former UK Independence Party leader and Fox News contributor Nigel Farage. The big lie, Nigel, it was all you, it was all a lie, and it was all a conspiracy to defeat her.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm a terrible person. I'm an unacceptable human being, as she said. I was only sorry she didn't call me deplorable. I would have enjoyed that. Isn't it interesting? I mean, she's going around the UK selling her book at £20 a copy. Clearly, the Clintons haven't made enough money yet. And it's all about why she lost the election, and it would appear that Brexit, the phenomenon of Brexit, which spilled across to the USA, is the reason that she lost. And she's basically saying that I lied to the British electorate. And what she's doing here is not just defending her own position, but acting as the high priestess of the globalist movement. She wants to reverse Brexit. I tell you what, she's making a sad, sorry spectacle of herself.
Well, when she says the amount of fabricated false information, you know she wants to say hashtag fake news, but that belongs to the other guy.
Well, that's right, it does. And the honest truth is that if you look at her record and her husband's record, be it on NAFTA, be it on China, be it on many other trade deals, they consistently told the American people these deals would be good for America, and they turned out not to be. And remember that had Hillary become president, she wanted America to join, as she described it, a hemispheric common market. Hillary sees the European Union as a prototype for a bigger form of global government, so she hates Brexit, she hates me, and she thinks it gave Trump the edge.
How much relevance does she have now? She's traveling the world blaming, a lot of people say she's blaming everyone else that she lost the election. How much relevance does she have?
Oh, yeah, I mean, none of this is her fault. I mean, she can't recognise the fact that her own sense of entitlement is what put off so many American voters. I don't think she's hugely relevant unless she's deciding perhaps to have another tilt at the presidency. Now, she denies that in public, but if she's not doing it, why is she going around the world making these big political arguments that she wants everything that happened in 2016 to be reversed?
She also famously said that she wanted a borderless world. I mean, isn't she the one that sort of, in front of, rich audiences will speak their language of globalism, but then try to go to the voters and hide it? That strikes me as a lie.
Well, her husband was terribly good at that. I mean, Bill often appeared as a populist at elections, and yet when he was elected, governed as a globalist. And exactly the same thing would happen with Hillary. You know, when she's with her friends on Wall Street and the multinationals, she sings a very different song. I have to say, it is a sorry sight to see somebody who is incapable of recognising their own deficiencies. She's deep in denial, and I just think she ought to recognise she lost, it's over, move on.
All right, his name is Nigel Farage, also known as the Big Liar, according to what we just heard. Nigel, thank you very much for joining us today from LA.
And this is part of a broader story: the rising tide of hardline right-wing nationalism around the world. Just yesterday, one of Britain's most prominent right-wing leaders, a man named Nigel Farage, who stoked anti-immigrant sentiments to win the referendum to have Britain leave the European Union, campaigned with Donald Trump in Mississippi. Farage has called for a bar on the children of legal immigrants from public schools and health services, has said women are, and I quote, worth less than men, and supports scrapping laws that prevent employers from discriminating based on race. That's who Donald Trump wants by his side when he is addressing an audience of American voters. And the grand godfather of this global brand of extreme nationalism is Russian President Vladimir Putin. And in fact, Farage regularly appears on Russian propaganda programs. Now he's standing on the same stage as the Republican nominee.
Back to Hillary Clinton and what I just did in my editorial there. She called Trump voters deplorable, racist, xenophobes, you name it. Roll tape.
Just be grossly generalistic. You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. Right? The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it.
Nigel Farage is with us. He's the former UK Independence Party leader. He's the man who led the Brits out of the European Union. Now, Nigel, there's a bit of a delay in us speaking here, so I can't have a normal conversation with you. But let me just ask you a question, then you take it. They said exactly the same thing about you, did they not, when you were organising Brexit? Go.
Oh, yes. I mean, in fact, when David Cameron once was asked about UKIP voters, and I quote, he said they are loonies, fruitcakes, and closet racists mostly. Well, that was nice of the Prime Minister, wasn't it? To talk about millions of British people. And what happened during the referendum was they said that Leave voters are old, angry, ill-educated, and motivated by racist thoughts. Now, the reason for doing that was to say to people in the middle, to say to undecided voters, look, for goodness sake, if you vote Leave the EU, you are joining up with this appalling group of people. And that's exactly the same game that Hillary was trying to play just a few days ago. And when she used the word deplorables, well, I'll tell you what I think. I think only one person comes out of this deplorably, and that's Hillary Clinton. Part of that same kind of elite that I saw in London, but in this case based in Washington, who has absolutely no understanding of how ordinary people live their lives.
Now, excuse me, earlier this morning, Donald Trump, and I believe you have appeared with Donald Trump, you appeared with him in Mississippi a couple of weeks ago. You're basically a supporter of Donald Trump. He came out this morning and said that what Hillary had said over the weekend was one of the biggest mistakes of this political season. I take it you agree with him, and do you agree that what she said will actually turn a lot of people to Trump and not enhance her own support? Go.
Well, what we've seen, I think, over the Western world, you know, last 10, 20 years, is this new sort of political aristocracy that have taken over. And the Clinton family in America, you know, sum that up rather beautifully. And they are very out of touch with the views of ordinary people. And if they think, by insulting the silent majority, they're doing themselves a favour by effectively demeaning people, by demonising people, then they were in for a big shock in Brexit, and I suspect she's in for a big shock in this American campaign as well. And I tell you why, people simply have had enough of being sneered at by out-of-touch, professional career political elites.
Nigel, you can't hear them, but I know a few of our viewers will be cheering you on big time this morning, and we thank you very much for coming back on the show. Nigel Farage, everyone. We'll see you again soon. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, both sides, you'll want to hear from the next person, because as we move towards the final stretch of the debate, Camilla is as yet undecided. So if we can get a microphone to the young lady with the black top. You're undecided and you have a question. Where are we going, Camilla?
So I'm a journalist on the Sunday Express, and a lot of our readers are concerned about security. And I think, not to scaremonger more, because we've probably had enough of that on both sides, we are facing the prospect, somewhat terrifyingly, of Donald Trump perhaps becoming the next American president, a man who doesn't seem to believe in NATO, who doesn't seem to believe in protecting people abroad. If America abandons us and we leave the EU, aren't we going to be left in a lot more of a precarious position, not least with the prospect of Putin still being in power?
Nigel Farage, how concerned should we be about being stranded then if we've not got the EU with us, running to nanny, some would say, and we've got Donald Trump in the White House?
Well, we could have Hillary in the White House. I don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. Look, I don't think...
Would it be Trump or Hillary? Who would you
I would
choose?
never vote for Hillary. I think she's a crook. And
So
I think,
you go for Trump?
And I think she'll get found out.
So you go for Trump?
I would certainly not vote for Hillary.
I think I better just say that if there's no evidence...
I worked for the company at the time of Whitewatergate. Let me tell you, I saw...
Let's move on. Let's move on. The Express newspapers...
Does that mean you vote for Trump? You vote for Trump?
I might abstain, but I wouldn't vote for Hillary. If you
But it is worth saying... It is worth saying the two world figures that are pro-Brexit are Donald Trump and Putin. They're the two guys that are for it.
Putin hasn't said a single word on this.
The guys that are for the European Union include Oswald Mosley, the president of China.
Back to Mr Farage.
You want to play that ridiculous game?
No, this is important. This is important. Just for a point of clarification, Express newspapers do not necessarily support the comments they're personally held by Nigel Farage as regards Hillary Clinton. We move on to Britain out of Europe and with Trump in the White House. Nigel Farage.
That isn't I think she's a crook. I didn't say she definitely was one.
You don't know how much I'm getting down my ear right now. I can hardly hear.
Okay, in terms of security, military security, the European Union wants its own army. All right, it's very simple. I confronted Nick Clegg with this back in 2014. He said I was a dangerous fantasist, and now we know the day after our referendum, the plans for a European army are going to be unveiled. I am very worried about that. I'm very worried about what I see an expansionist foreign policy that the European Union has. It's been very provocative in one or two parts of the world already, especially in the Ukraine, where it behaved
outrageous.
Where it behaved in the most.
You are rewriting history, Nigel.
Well, it happened 3 years ago. It really was quite disgraceful, and I fear with the European army that we would find ourselves dragged into new conflicts, which frankly were none of our interest. The better model than a European army is a military structure where nation states cooperate together rather than giving up their ability to make decisions. And I do think that NATO has served us very well. And I frankly think it impossible that President Trump would take America out of NATO. I cannot foresee any circumstances. I don't see any circumstances in which he would. I really don't.
Except his own views.
I really don't. Well, his bark in a campaign, I don't think in office he'll be anything like as extreme as we fear.
Let's get Chukwuemeka. You're almost jumping out of your seat.
Well, increasingly, Nigel's sounding like a Trump sympathiser and now a Putin apologist. There is absolutely...
Were you happy with the Ukraine? Were you happy that we actually encouraged the overthrow of an elected leader in the Ukraine? There was a coup.
Look,
there was a coup. It was a disgrace.
What happened in Ukraine was President Putin walked in there and took part of that country. And that is completely inexcusable.
That was later.
And trying to blame that on the European Union...
You can't rewrite history, Chuck. Sorry, mate.
Well, I think you're rewriting history.
The Crimea happened afterwards.
You are an apologist for President Putin.
No, I'm not.
But in terms of security and defence, look, if there was
any... call his work in Syria brilliant, Nigel. You're not an apologist, you're a fan.
Well, do you know what? Do you know what?
You're a fan of... Was it because he bombed civilians?
The fact that he stopped us going to war, which is what most of Parliament wanted to do in...
Hillary Clinton slamming Nigel Farage. She gave an interview with the Sunday Times, that's a London newspaper, and here's the quote. He, that's Farage, came to the US to campaign for Trump and spent half of his remarks insulting me in a very personal way and talking about Trump as the alpha male, the silver-backed gorilla. Think of those images and what that says about what's acceptable and what's not. Fox News contributor Nigel Farage joins us now. He always smiles. There you go. I knew he would smile eventually. All right, you got to give us your response to what was a very strong attack on you in the Sunday Times.
Yes, it really was. I mean, Hillary is here in London selling her book, What Happened. It's £20 a go. Clearly the Clintons haven't made enough money yet. And it's a book that should be renamed, in my opinion, The Great Whinge. Because none of the reason she lost the presidency is to do with her. It's because the world is a very unfair place, and it's full of horrible, beastly, nasty people that are not Clinton supporters, people like me. The idea that I spent much of my speech in Mississippi on Hillary Clinton is ludicrous. I simply said, if I was an American citizen, I wouldn't vote for her if you paid me. She, of course, responded in kind the next day, last August, by calling me all the names under the sun. I was labelled a white supremacist and goodness knows what else. Look, I think the upshot of this is very simple. I think it's important in life to be judged by your enemies. And if Hillary Clinton is a sworn enemy of mine, I reckon I'm in a pretty good place.
Nigel, can I just explain for our viewers the use of the word to whinge? Whinging is complaining or whining. It's an Anglo-Australian word which you've now introduced into America, and I think it might fly.
Anyway, but it really is, what a sad sight, isn't it? You know, to see somebody that can't accept that perhaps the main reason she lost is because she, from the start, gave this sense of entitlement, as if, you know, it was the crown that was due to be placed on her head. She was arrogant, she was out of touch, she didn't go out and meet voters and citizens, and yet somehow it's all everybody else's fault, including mine. I've a funny feeling this book is not going to sell very well here in the UK.
I want to draw your attention to, you know what's going on here. This is Catalonia. Thousands of protesters over the weekend were demonstrating in favour of national unity, opposing the breakaway of Catalonia. Now, it seemed to us, from a distance, we're here in America, we're looking at Europe, it seems like it was heading towards kind of balkanization, splitting up into very, very small countries. But maybe that's not the case. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, let's get a sense of perspective here. 20 years ago, the number of Catalans that wanted to separate from Spain was about 15 to 20%. Over the last few years, that's risen, and in some polls, it's been as high as 40%. But what happened on October the 1st, when the local Catalan government tried to hold a referendum, and the Spanish police used the Spanish government used 10,000 police to stop people voting, literally dragging elderly women out of polling stations by their hair to stop them voting. Since then, I have a feeling that actually those who now want to separate from Spain have grown. Sure, there are two sides to this debate, but what is an absolute fact is the Spanish government, and this is supposed to be a modern democracy, they're supposed to have moved on from the days of General Franco and fascism. Their behaviour has been so awful that I think that Catalan separation and independence has got a little bit of wind in its sails now.
We shall see. Nigel, thanks for joining us. Always appreciated. We'll see you again soon. Thanks very much.